Funny thing about messages, most of them get twisted, lost, buried under all the noise people make. Everyone wants to talk. Everyone wants to preach. Everyone wants to play messenger. But every once in a while, something cuts through the chaos, sharp, clear, undeniable. Not a whisper, not a hint, not a coincidence. A direct line. A word that doesn't leave room for doubt, doesn't need translation, doesn't care about your excuses. It's not dressed up in rituals or dressed down in fancy speeches. It's raw, it's simple, and it's meant for you. Clarity cuts through the noise, and isn't that what makes it so uncomfortable? People spend their lives swimming in distractions, drowning in chatter, surrounding themselves with voices that say a whole lot of nothing. Advice from this one, opinions from that one, endless noise from every direction. It's comforting, in a twisted way, because when everything is loud, you don't have to face what's real. But clarity is ruthless. It doesn't compete with the noise. It slices through it. One clean strike, and suddenly all the excuses, all the diversions, all the masks fall silent. That's why people fear it. Because once clarity appears, there's nowhere left to hide. Noise is safe. You can blame it, hide in it, get lost in it. You can say, I didn't know. I couldn't hear. I wasn't sure. But clarity robs you of that safety net. When a word comes through so sharp, so undeniable, it leaves you exposed. It leaves you to face with the truth you've been running from. There's no more, maybe later. No more. I'll figure it out eventually. The message is clear, and because it's clear, it demands something from you. It demands your attention. It demands a response. And most people aren't ready for that. The funny part is, clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It's not the booming voice. It's not the dramatic performance. It's quiet, almost unsettlingly so. Because when something is clear, it doesn't need volume. It needs only presence. It arrives like a blade of glass in the middle of chaos. Everything else blurs, fades, becomes irrelevant, while the truth stands in perfect focus. That's why it rattles you. That's why it sticks. Because in a world full of echoes, clarity is the only voice that doesn't repeat. It pierces. And once it pierces, you can't unhear it. You can pretend sure. You can bury it, drown it out with more noise. Distract yourself with 1,000 meaningless things. But it doesn't disappear. Clarity has a way of tattooing itself on your mind. It waits. It lingers. It comes back in the quiet moments, when there's nothing left to drown it out. The more you try to ignore it, the louder it becomes, not because it raises its voice, but because silence leaves it with nowhere to hide. That's the power of a direct message. It doesn't waste time with riddles. It doesn't need a puzzle or a parable to make its point. It arrives as it is, sharp and undeniable. You don't get to twist it into something more convenient. You don't get to dress it up in pretty words to make yourself feel better. It doesn't bend for you. You bend for it. And that's what makes clarity feel so heavy, because deep down, you already know it's the truth. The noise in your life will always try to fight against it. People will tell you, no, it's not that serious. No, it doesn't mean that. No, you're overthinking. But the clarity you felt doesn't need their approval. It doesn't need validation from a crowd. You know when something cuts deeper than anything else around it. You know when the words don't just brush against you, they carve into you. That's how you recognize clarity. It changes you, even in an instant. Most people run from it. But here's the irony: clarity is what they've been asking for all along. They pray for answers, beg for direction, cry for purpose, and when clarity finally shows up, they panic. Because answers are never as comfortable as questions. Direction is never as easy as wandering. Purpose is never as light as distraction. Clarity cuts. But it cuts because it removes the nonsense, strips away the illusions, and forces you to see what's real. And once you see it, you can't go back to blindness. Clarity cuts through the noise because it was never meant to compete with it. It was meant to silence it. And that silence, that sudden stillness, that moment when all the fake voices fall away and only the truth remains, that's the moment that changes everything. Some words are too sharp to ignore. No matter how badly you want to pretend they don't exist. They don't slide off your skin like casual chatter. They don't blend into the static of everyday noise. They sink, they stick, they cut. And once they cut, you can't patch yourself up with the usual lies. You can't laugh it off. You can't drown it in distractions. You can't pretend you didn't hear it. That's the thing about words that carry weight. They leave marks deeper than scars. Marks that don't fade just because you close your ears. People think they're good at ignoring what they don't want to hear. They scroll past it. They change the subject. They surround themselves with people who'll tell them the softer version, the sugar-coated version. But when a message is too sharp, it slices straight through all those defenses. It doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't care if you're ready. It doesn't care if you've built a fortress of excuses around your heart. Sharp words don't knock politely. They break in. And you know when you've been cut by one. There's no confusion, no second guessing. You feel it in your chest, that sting, that ache that refuses to leave. Maybe it comes in the middle of the night, when the world finally goes quiet, and there's nothing left to shield you. Maybe it hits you in the middle of a crowd, where no one notices you've just been pierced, where you smile on the outside, but inside you're bleeding. Either way, you can't shake it. You can't unhear it. It follows you, no matter how far you try to run. The reason those words feel so sharp is because they bypass the illusions. Most talk is meant to keep you comfortable. People tell you what you want to hear, what won't disrupt your fragile little balance. But when the truth arrives, it doesn't bother with comfort. It doesn't soften the blow, doesn't sugar-coat the edges. It arrives raw, unpolished, and because of that, it slices straight through the fog. It exposes everything you've been trying to cover up, and that exposure, it terrifies people. Because once you've been cut by truth, you can't go back to pretending. You can't patch yourself with the lies that used to work. You can't look at yourself the same way. Suddenly, you see the cracks, the flaws, the reality you've been burying under smiles and excuses. It hurts, but it's also undeniable. And the more you try to silence it, the sharper it becomes. Like a splinter you refuse to pull out. It digs deeper, festers, spreads until the pain is unbearable. That's why ignoring sharp words never works. They don't fade with time. They grow. They echo louder in your head the more you try to suppress them. Every distraction you build collapses under their weight. Every excuse you invent crumbles when confronted by their edge. Because these words weren't meant to be ignored. They weren't meant to be filed away with all the meaningless chatter of the world. They were meant to cut. They were meant to wound. Because sometimes the wound is the only way you'll finally pay attention. And maybe that's the point. Pain forces focus. A cut makes you stop, makes you notice, makes you care. If words didn't hurt, you'd keep walking past them, brushing them off like background noise. But the ones that slice, those are the ones designed to wake you up. They bleed you on purpose, not to destroy you, but to strip you of your numbness, to remind you that you're alive, that you still feel, that you can't live forever pretending everything is fine. So when a message slices through, when it refuses to leave you alone, when it stings long after the sound has faded, that's not an accident. That's the truth demanding to be acknowledged. Not with polite nods or half-hearted agreement, but with your full attention. You can dodge it for a while, bury it under layers of noise, but the cut will always remind you it's there. And the deeper it goes, the harder it becomes to ignore. Excuses don't change the message, but people love to believe they do. They stack them up like bricks, building walls so high they convince themselves the truth can't climb over. I'm not ready yet. I'll try tomorrow. I didn't have the chance. Little phrases, tiny shields, flimsy armor to soften the sting of what's already been said. But here's the thing. The message doesn't bend just because you don't feel like facing it. It doesn't rewrite itself to fit your comfort zone. It doesn't pause, waiting politely for you to be in the mood. The message remains what it is, no matter how many excuses you spit out to protect yourself. People have this funny talent for twisting reality into something easier to swallow. They'll tell themselves the timing was wrong, that life was unfair, that someone else had it easier. Excuses are like bandages slapped over wounds without ever cleaning them. They don't heal anything. They just hide the infection festering underneath. And while you're busy covering the pain with stories, the truth is still there, waiting unchanged, unmoved by your attempts to dress it up. The message doesn't care about your reasoning. It doesn't stop existing because you've convinced yourself you have a valid excuse. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm and saying, "I don't believe in rain." You're still soaked. You can say, "It's not fair. I didn't bring an umbrella." You're still wet. The storm doesn't listen. The storm doesn't care. That's the nature of truth. It isn't swayed by your side of the story. It simply is. But that's why excuses feel so comfortable. They give you the illusion of control. They let you pretend you're not ignoring the truth, just postponing it. They let you believe you're the victim of circumstance, not the architect of your own avoidance. Excuses don't remove the message. They just buy you time. Or at least, they trick you into thinking they do. But while you're stalling, life keeps moving, opportunities keep passing, and the message you're dodging keeps cutting deeper every time you circle back to it. And you do circle back to it. No matter how far you run, the message waits for you. It creeps into your silence. It sneaks into your dreams. It stares back at you when you're lying in the dark with nothing left to distract yourself. Because you can pile on excuses all you want, but they don't erase the truth. They just make it heavier, pressing down on you with the weight of all the time you wasted pretending it wasn't there. That's the cruel part about excuses. They feel protective in the moment, but they always betray you. You tell yourself, I can't do it because I don't have enough time. 1 year later, you look back and realize time was never the problem. It was your own fear. You tell yourself, I can't because I don't have enough strength. Then you realize strength only comes after you start. Excuses are lies you tell yourself so you can stay still without guilt. But guilt doesn't vanish. It grows. And eventually, the realization hits the message never changed. But you wasted all this time trying to change the story around it. Excuses don't make you safer. They just make you slower. They don't protect you. They paralyze you. The message doesn't soften because you begged it to. It doesn't adjust itself because you weren't ready. It stays sharp. It stays clear. And it waits for you to either face it or keep bleeding from the cuts you've been pretending not to feel. And the longer you hide, the sharper it feels when you finally face it. That's the truth about excuses. They may feel like a shield, but really they're just chains. They don't keep the message out. They keep you locked in. And while you rattle those chains, convincing yourself they're armor, the truth stands there, unchanged, untouched, waiting for the moment you finally run out of lies to tell yourself. Simplicity carries the deepest truth, but people don't like simple. No, they prefer complicated answers, tangled words, riddles wrapped in rituals and rules, because simple is dangerous. Simple can't be twisted into whatever you want it to mean. Simple doesn't leave room for games. It just stands there raw, naked, undeniable. And that's why it cuts deeper than the most elaborate explanation. Because there's no wiggle room, no escape hatch, no place to hide when the truth shows up wearing nothing but itself. Think about it. The world loves to dress everything up. They build systems. They invent fancy words. They pile on layers until you can't even see the heart of the thing anymore. They call it wisdom. They call it culture. They call it knowledge. But what it really is, distraction. It's a shield to protect fragile minds from the brutality of something simple. Because if it's simple, then there are no excuses. If it's simple, then you can't pretend you don't understand. And if you can't pretend, then you have no choice but to face it. The truth isn't hidden in thousand-page books or locked away in complicated codes. It's in the small things, the words you've heard 1,000 times, but ignored because they seemed too obvious. Do what's right. Be honest. Stop lying to yourself. Simple. So simple it's uncomfortable. Because if it's really that straightforward, then what's your excuse for not living it? That's why people reject simplicity. They're not confused, they're afraid. Simplicity doesn't entertain. It doesn't soothe. It doesn't let you play endless games of what if and maybe later. It grabs you by the throat and says, "This is it. You already know." And knowing is the part that burns. Because once you know, you can't unknow. You can't hide behind the illusion of mystery anymore. You're exposed. And exposed people have to make a choice. Either act on the truth or betray it. Both hurt, but at least one of them leads somewhere real. And the funny thing, people will travel across the world, spend fortunes, chase endless teachers and mentors, all in search of a message they already had inside them from the start. But because it was simple, they didn't value it. They thought the truth had to be hidden in some distant temple, written in a secret language, guarded by people smarter than them. They ignored the whisper in their own chest because it wasn't glamorous enough. And yet, when all the noise fades, when all the masks drop, the voice that's left is the one that was there the whole time. Simplicity feels heavy because it refuses to entertain your imagination. It doesn't twist itself into your comfort zone. It just stares you down, unflinching, until you admit it's been right in front of you all along. And the longer you run from it, the more painful it becomes to realize how much time you wasted chasing complexity that never gave you answers. But that's what makes simplicity powerful. It doesn't need decoration. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need 1,000 voices to repeat it. It just is. Pure, clear, sharp. And when it cuts, it leaves a wound that can't be ignored. Not because it's cruel, but because it's real. And reality, stripped of all the fancy words, all the noise, all the distractions, is always simple. Too simple to avoid. Too simple to escape. Too simple to ignore once it's in front of you. Direct messages demand direct action. And that's where most people freeze. They love the idea of signs, of whispers, of hidden meanings they can twist and debate for years. They like puzzles because puzzles give them time. They can sit around, dissect every piece, argue over interpretations, and in the meantime, they don't have to move. But a direct message leaves no such luxury. It doesn't arrive dressed in riddles. It doesn't give you endless room for interpretation. It comes sharp, clear, impossible to misunderstand. And because it's undeniable, it demands something from you right now. Not later. Not someday. Now. That's why people flinch when they hear it. Because deep down, they know what it means the second it lands. They don't need to consult 100 voices or search for hidden translations. They already know. The clarity burns in their chest, and with it comes the uncomfortable truth. They can't keep stalling. They can't keep pretending. The message has arrived, and it won't wait politely for them to grow brave. But action is terrifying. See, thinking is safe. Planning is safe. Even worrying is safe. Those things don't change anything, but they give you the illusion of progress. Action. Action rips away the safety net. Action forces you to commit. Once you move, once you choose, there's no crawling back to the comfort of indecision. And that's why a direct message feels so heavy. It doesn't allow you to hide in the gray areas anymore. It shoves you straight into black and white. And people hate black and white. They crave the blur, the fog, the in-between. Because the blur lets them drift without consequence. But when a direct message lands, there is no blur. There is no mist. There's only the demand staring you in the face, act or don't. Move or stay. Live or waste. No more debates. No more half measures. No more excuses. And that's when the fear sets in. Because they know action costs something. It costs comfort. It costs the easy rhythm of routine. It costs the fragile illusions they've been living under. A direct message threatens to rip away everything familiar and replace it with the unknown. And people would rather live in chains they understand than step into freedom they can't predict. But the irony is, not acting is still an action. Pretending to ignore the message, pretending you didn't hear it, choosing to bury it under noise, that's still a choice. You can't escape the demand just by staying still. Stillness is a response, and that response always comes with consequences. The message doesn't dissolve because you refused it. It lingers. It waits. It sharpens the weight of regret with every passing moment you chose silence over movement. The scariest part, the direct message isn't always grand. Sometimes it's small, simple, almost unimpressive. But that's what makes it dangerous. You can't brush it off as coincidence. You can't dress it up with theories. You know, instantly it was for you. And that knowing alone makes it impossible to go back to life as if nothing happened. Direct action doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll get it all right. It just means you don't get to sit on the sidelines anymore. It means the moment has arrived where you either take the step or you admit you chose not to. And once you admit that, you lose the illusion of ignorance. So when that clear, sharp word slices through, when it leaves no room for argument, the demand is simple: act, move, do. Not tomorrow, not when you feel more ready, not after another round of excuses, now. Because the message didn't come dressed in riddles. It came direct. And direct doesn't negotiate. Direct doesn't stall. Direct waits only long enough for you to realize there's no way out but forward. Funny thing about life, some words come and go, easy to ignore, easy to forget. But every now and then, there's a message that doesn't circle back, a moment that won't repeat itself. It slips in quietly, almost fragile enough to miss. And if you're not paying attention, it's gone. No rewind, no replay, no second chance. It's not the kind of message that begs. It doesn't scream, it just stands there for a breath, waiting to see if you'll notice. And the truth is, this one was never meant to appear twice. Some moments never return, But people live like they've got an endless supply. They waste time, they waste chances, they waste opportunities as if tomorrow is guaranteed, as if life owes them a second try. But the cruel joke is, it doesn't. Time doesn't care how unprepared you feel. It doesn't care how scared you are. It doesn't care how many excuses you stack up. When a moment passes, it doesn't stop to ask if you're ready. It just leaves quietly, without looking back. And no matter how much you beg, no matter how much you regret, that exact moment never comes again. That's the part people never want to face. They tell themselves, next time, tomorrow, when I feel stronger, when I have more. But what if there is no next time? What if the one shot you had to speak, to act, to change, was already in your hands, and you let it slip because you thought life was generous with second chances? That's how it works. You never realize how rare a moment was until it's already gone. The past is full of ghosts like that. Conversations you should have had but didn't. Risks you should have taken but avoided. Words you swallowed. Opportunities you ignored. Doors you let close. And once they're gone, they haunt you. Not because you didn't know what to do, but because you did. And you still didn't move. That's the sting. You weren't ignorant, you were hesitant. You waited too long, thinking the moment would wait for you. But moments don't wait. They move on without mercy. Some moments never return, because they're not supposed to. They were designed for you, here, now, and once they pass, they belong to memory. You can try to recreate them. You can try to chase them, but it's never the same. You can apologize later, but it won't carry the same weight as if you had spoken then. You can try again later, but the timing, the opening, the alignment, it won't be what it was. Life doesn't recycle its best gifts. It offers them once, and only once. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's the rarity that makes a moment powerful. If you knew it would come back around, you wouldn't value it. You wouldn't feel the urgency, the gravity, the sharp edge of now or never. The fleeting nature is what makes it burn into your soul. It forces you to decide. Will you act or will you freeze? Will you step forward or will you stand still? Because once the clock ticks past it, the choice is made for you. Most people learn this too late. They think life is an endless cycle of do-overs, until one day they realize they can't go back. They can't unsay what was said, can't miss what was missed, can't rewind to that one fragile opening that could have changed everything. And then they sit in the wreckage of regret, wishing they had treated the moment like it mattered. But wishing doesn't bring it back. Some moments never return, and that's exactly why you can't sleepwalk through life. You can't keep waiting for the perfect mood, the perfect conditions, the perfect confidence, because the moment won't pause while you prepare. It will come whether you're ready or not, and if you hesitate, it will vanish just as quickly as it appeared. And the cruel part, you won't always know which moments are the ones that matter until later. Which means you have to treat every moment like it could be the one. That's the game life plays. It doesn't tell you which seconds are ordinary and which are history shifting. It hides them in plain sight, disguised as small choices, simple conversations, quiet openings. And if you're not awake, if you're not paying attention, you'll walk right past them. Some moments never return. And the question isn't whether they'll come. It's whether you'll be ready enough to catch them before they slip away forever. A single chance can shift everything, but most people don't believe that. They think change has to be gradual, built brick by brick, slow and steady like a machine grinding forward. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it hands you a single chance, one decision, one moment that carries more weight than years of planning. One step, one word, one leap, and the entire direction of your life bends with it. That's how fragile, how unpredictable, how dangerous opportunity really is. People underestimate the power of one chance because they're blinded by repetition. Every day feels the same, so they assume tomorrow will look like today. They grow numb, waiting for something dramatic to happen, never realizing that the drama hides inside ordinary seconds. A single handshake can introduce you to someone who changes your path. A single yes or no can rewrite your story. A single risk can break the cycle you thought was unbreakable. And yet, because it doesn't arrive with flashing lights, you treat it like nothing. Until later. Until hindsight slices you open with the truth. You had it in your hands, and you let it go. A single chance can shift everything, because timing has its own kind of violence. You don't get to choose when opportunity arrives. It doesn't consult your calendar. It doesn't care if you're ready. It just shows up, sometimes disguised as inconvenience, sometimes cloaked in fear, sometimes looking like nothing at all. And you either grab it or you don't. But if you don't, you can't force it to come back. That's why people choke on regret. They thought the chance would wait for them to feel confident. And by the time they were ready, it was gone. It's funny how one decision can outweigh 1,000 intentions. You can spend years dreaming, years talking about what you'll do, years preparing yourself in the shadows. But all of that means nothing without the single moment where you act. One moment of courage has more power than a decade of hesitation. Because that's how life works. It doesn't reward you for planning. It rewards you for stepping into the unknown when the chance finally appears. But here's the dark side. Most people never know when they're holding that kind of chance. It doesn't come with a warning label. You don't get a voice from the sky saying, "This is it. This is the one." You only realize it after the fact, when the door has already closed. That's why awareness is everything. You have to live sharp, alive, awake. Because the second you drift into autopilot, the moment could slip right past you. And once it's gone, it doesn't turn around. One chance can shift everything, but only if you're willing to risk. Because chances don't feel safe. They don't come wrapped in certainty. They come wrapped in doubt, in fear, in the possibility of failure. That's the price. You want the shift. You have to step into the unknown. You have to take the leap knowing you might fall. And that's why most people never seize it. They'd rather stay comfortable in the prison they know than gamble for freedom they can't see. But think about it. Every story you admire, every person who broke chains, every life that transformed, it happened because of one chance. Someone said yes when it would have been easier to say no. Someone walked away when it would have been safer to stay. Someone spoke up when silence would have been simpler. And that one choice shifted everything. Not gradually, instantly. The tragedy is, most people won't risk missing their chance. And in doing so, they miss it anyway. They bury their lives under someday. They tell themselves they're waiting for the right moment. But the right moment was already here, and they ignored it. One chance. That's all it takes. But only if you're bold enough to see it, brave enough to grab it, and reckless enough to risk losing what you thought was safe. Because safety doesn't shift anything. Risk does. And when the moment comes, when that single chance stands in front of you, everything hangs on whether you act or freeze. Silence hides rare truths, but people run from silence like it's a curse. They fill every second with noise, distraction, chatter, because deep down they're terrified of what silence might reveal. In the quiet, you can't escape yourself. You can't drown out the doubts, the wounds, the whispers that claw at the back of your mind. So you blast music, scroll endlessly. Surround yourself with voices that mean nothing. All so you never have to face the truths that only come alive when the noise dies down. But silence is where the rarest things are found. The truths that don't compete, the truths that don't shout, the truths that wait patiently, buried beneath the chaos. Silence has a way of exposing what's real. It cuts through the performance, the masks, the lies you tell others and yourself. It doesn't flatter you, it doesn't comfort you. It strips you bare, leaves you standing in front of the mirror with nowhere to hide. That's why people avoid it. They don't want to see who they really are, without the static to cover it up. Rare truths live in silence, because silence has no agenda. Noise always wants something from you. Advertisements scream to buy. Voices scream to believe. Distractions scream to keep you numb. But silence just waits. It doesn't push. It doesn't sell. It doesn't manipulate. It simply holds space until you finally stop running long enough to hear what's been buried inside you all along. And what you hear there can change you, if you're brave enough to listen. The strange thing about silence is that it feels empty at first. But the longer you sit in it, the more it fills with weight. Your thoughts get louder, your heart starts talking, your instincts sharpen. You start hearing things you ignored before, the regret, the desire, the truth you've been too busy to face. And at first, it's uncomfortable. It burns. It makes you squirm. But that's the sign you've found something real. Because truth doesn't always soothe you. Sometimes it wounds you before it heals you. Most people don't make it that far. The moment silence starts pressing on them, they run back to the noise. They tell themselves they're too busy. They need distraction. They can't afford to sit still. But the real reason is simpler. They're scared of the rare truths silence hides. They'd rather live shallow in the noise than risk finding something deep in the quiet. They'd rather stay blind than see clearly, because clarity demands responsibility. And silence has a way of demanding it without saying a word. But the ones who dare to sit with silence, even when it feels unbearable, they find what others never will. They find the rare truths that guide, that convict, that strengthen. They find the voice that doesn't belong to the crowd, the clarity that can't be shaken by opinion, the direction that doesn't depend on applause. They discover pieces of themselves they didn't know were missing, and in that stillness, they realize the noise was never telling them the truth. It was only keeping them from it. Silence hides rare truths, but it doesn't hand them to just anyone. You have to earn them. You have to be willing to endure the discomfort, the loneliness, the tension of sitting still in a world that constantly demands movement. You have to be willing to face the shadows inside yourself without flinching. That's why so few ever uncover them. They're too addicted to the noise, too allergic to stillness, too afraid of what they might hear if the distractions fall away. But those truths don't vanish just because you ignore them. They sit there, waiting like a buried treasure that only silence can unlock. And one day, when the noise runs out, when the distractions no longer satisfy, you'll find yourself face to face with the silence you've avoided. And in that moment, if you're brave enough, you'll hear it. The rare truth that was there all along, waiting for you to finally shut out the world and listen. Missed messages leave lasting scars, and the cruel part is, you don't always see the scar right away. At first, it feels small, harmless, like nothing important slipped away. You tell yourself it wasn't the right time, or maybe it didn't matter, or maybe it'll come back again later. But the truth is, some messages only appear once, and when you ignore them, they don't vanish. They echo. They carve themselves into the quiet parts of your mind, and years later, you still feel the sting of what you didn't do, what you didn't hear, what you let slip through your fingers. It's not always the big things that leave the deepest scars. Sometimes it's the simple words you should have said when you had the chance. The apology you swallowed. The encouragement you never gave. The risk you didn't take when everything inside you said you should. Those little moments become ghosts, haunting you long after the moment has passed. And the haunting doesn't come from what happened. It comes from what didn't. From silence where there should have been action. From hesitation where there should have been boldness. From blindness where there should have been awareness. People underestimate how heavy missed messages become. They think life moves on. That time heals all wounds. That forgotten chances disappear into the background. But time doesn't erase what you ignored. It just buries it deeper, until one day it resurfaces when you least expect it. You hear a line, see a face, feel a memory, and suddenly the weight of that missed message comes crashing back. And you realize it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Waiting for you to acknowledge that the chance is over. and the scar is permanent. Scars like that change you. They make you cautious, hesitant, afraid of missing again. Yet somehow they also make you numb. You start living with the ache, pretending it doesn't exist, but it does. It whispers at night, in the quiet moments when you can't distract yourself. It asks you questions you can't answer. Why didn't you act? Why didn't you speak? Why didn't you listen? And no matter how many excuses you give, deep down you know the truth. You let fear or pride or distraction steal something that was meant for you. Missed messages don't just leave scars on your memory. They change the shape of your life. A door that could have opened never did. A path that could have been walked never was. And maybe you build another life. Maybe you keep moving forward, but in the back of your mind, you always wonder what might have been if you had caught it. If you had paid attention, if you had been braver in that one fragile moment. That wondering becomes a weight you carry, a wound you hide but never truly heal. And here's the cruelest part. You don't always know which moments matter until after they're gone. That's why scars cut so deep, because you realize too late that it wasn't just another passing second. It was the second. The one designed to shift everything. The one that won't come back. And by the time you see it clearly, the window is closed. The message has faded, and all you're left with is the mark it left behind. People try to numb those scars with excuses. They tell themselves, it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't my time. Maybe I'll get another chance. But deep down they know better. They know some moments were theirs, and they let them slip away. No excuse, no story, no lie can erase that. The scar remains as proof that they were given something rare and didn't treat it like it mattered. Missed messages leave lasting scars because they remind you of what could have been. They force you to live with the truth that hesitation has consequences, that ignoring the whisper costs more than you thought, that inaction can wound you deeper than failure ever could. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how far you run, the scar follows, not to punish, but to remind you that next time, if there ever is a next time, you can't afford to miss it again. Awareness is the price of change, and most people don't want to pay it. They say they want transformation. They say they want growth. They say they want something different. But what they really want is comfort dressed up as progress. Because awareness costs. It costs you your illusions, your excuses, your lies. It rips the blindfold off your eyes and forces you to see the truth about yourself, about your choices, about the life you've built. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's why people avoid it. Ignorance is painful, but it's easier. Awareness. Awareness demands action. The strange thing is, people are often closer to change than they realize. They feel the weight of their mistakes. They feel the frustration of being stuck. They feel the hunger for more. But they never step into awareness because awareness makes it real. As long as they stay numb, as long as they drown in distractions, they can keep pretending. Pretending it's not that bad. Pretending they'll fix it later. Pretending life will somehow rearrange itself without their effort. But the second they wake up, the second they see clearly, the pretending dies. And with it, every excuse they've been hiding behind. Awareness is brutal. It shows you the cracks you tried to paint over. It shows you the patterns you repeat, the cycles you keep falling into, the lies you've told yourself so many times you started believing them. It strips away the stories, the masks, the performances, and for a moment you're exposed. Vulnerable, naked. You can't blame anyone else. You can't hide behind circumstance. You can't keep pretending you don't know. You know. And knowledge is heavy, because knowledge demands responsibility. But that's where change begins. Not in the wishing, not in the talking, not in the daydreaming. Change begins the moment you become aware, the moment you stop lying to yourself, the moment you admit the truth you've been running from. That awareness cuts deep, but it also cuts open the possibility of something new. You can't heal what you won't face. You can't grow past what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't transform while still asleep. Awareness wakes you up, and it hurts, but it also frees. Most people live their entire lives avoiding that cost. They build routines, distractions, little cages of comfort, all designed to keep them from seeing too much. They chase entertainment, chase business, chase noise, because silence would force them into awareness, and awareness would force them into change. So they stay blind, because blindness feels safer. But safe doesn't change you. Safe keeps you stuck, circling the same patterns, suffering the same pain, telling the same lies until time runs out. Awareness is the price of change, and once you pay it, there's no going back. You can't unknow the truth. You can't return to ignorance. Once you see the chains, you can't pretend you're free. Once you see the cracks, you can't pretend the mask is flawless. Once you see what you've been avoiding, you either rise and change or sink under the weight of knowing you refuse to. That's why awareness feels like a burden, but it's really a gift. Because it forces you to stop drifting and start deciding. The question is, are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to face the discomfort of seeing yourself clearly, of confronting the lies, of admitting the truth? Because if you are, you unlock the possibility of change. If you're not, you stay trapped. People think change is about strength, but it isn't. It's about honesty. Brutal, unflinching honesty. And honesty only comes when you step into awareness. That's the trade. You lose the comfort of ignorance, but you gain the power of transformation. You give up the safety of lies, but you gain the strength of truth. You sacrifice the numbness of distraction, but you gain the clarity to finally move forward. Awareness is the price of change. And until you're willing to pay it, you'll keep repeating the same cycles, stuck in the same pain, pretending you don't know why. But deep down you do. You always did.